is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Hollywood Already Did Its Marvel Pair-Ups, where we take a break from our regular podcast and give you a mini-series following whichever Disney Plus Marvel show is out. We've done the history of sitcoms through WandaVision. We have done Buddies for Life, looking at buddy cop comedies with Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And the team is back to give you Loki Through the Years, where we are going to look at each episode of Loki and pair it up like a fine wine with a time travel based movie and look at the themes in these movies, how these affect the characters, the rules, because everybody has their own rules, how and why the appeal of these movies and what it is doing to the character of Loki. Of course, I am your host, Blake Schultz, and with me is Jamie Jirac.
Hello.
And Terrence Tatum.
Hello, everyone.
And this week we have the first episode of Loki. We're back after what felt like forever, the longest time. We're staying up on Tuesdays now to watch it because Disney has decided that's when we'll be able to get through without it crashing. And we are, of course, pairing up our first one with an all-time classic, a fan favorite, a movie that has aged like cheaper wine, but is still pretty good, the Back to the Future series. But before we get into that, guys, what did we all think of Loki's first episode?
Terrence?
Jamie, take us away. Whoever wants to go first.
Yeah, okay, I'll do it. I love it. It's so much fun. Different, like when Falcon and the Winter Soldier's first episode, I didn't immediately watch it again. Where this one I've already watched it twice, the first episode. It's just so weird and wonderful. And somebody asked me if it has potential to be better than WandaVision, and for me that's literally impossible. I'm never ever going to like anything more than WandaVision.
Yeah, for those of you who are not watching, there's a big Wanda behind her. So that's that's not gonna happen.
It's just that's just a fact. But Loki is my second favorite Marvel character after one. Well, maybe third now that Agatha exists. But so a whole show for Loki is so my jams. I just love how weird it is. They can go any place. I love multiverse stuff. I'm really hoping we get this multiversal war that cartoon was teasing, which I know could be Secret Wars. There's so many ways to go with it. But just Tom and Owen are going to be just the chemistry there. That's one thing about the Disney Plus shows is they are really giving us some solid pairings, and I'm stoked about that. And I've already seen episode 2, so I have to be careful about not to give anything away.
Is Mephisto showing up in episode 2?
God damn it. No,
there's a lot of red in your background.
She's
Jamie.
already
Is that because of the devil?
Playing with time.
I see you have a Blu-ray of Devil produced by M. Night Shyamalan back there.
Listen, you know who also has devil horns? Loki.
Indeed.
So.
This is my wheelhouse. I love this weird stuff. Sci-fi is my bag. So everything being so odd, it's just this show has a weird Coen Brothers-esque comedy beat going in middle of sci-fi stuff. I'm I love it. I want to mix it all together. As a person who loves, I love all the story building. They're breaking it down enough. The Miss, we'll talk about it, but the Miss Tara Strong's character, Miss Time, is perfect.
Miss Minutes, Terrence.
Sorry, Miss Minutes is perfect, and the psychedelic stuff is broken down enough that the normal folks will get it. But what really I love about this episode is just the actors of Owen and Tom just in a room together going tit for tat. That is the sweet spot of this episode, and I love it. They're one-upping, them going back and forth. It's switching on the fly from being super funny and comedy to, oh my God, Loki is going through it right now. Is just phenomenal to watch. I loved it.
I agree with everything you guys have said. My eyes were glued to this screen front to back from just rewatching in-game footage that I've seen more times than I'd like to admit to anybody on a first or second date. The in-game number comes on the third. That's when the trust is established. But we had an aesthetic that unlike anything else we've seen in the MCU. And one big complaint I have about most movies, most video games, most things is that we are sapped of color We are sapped of any like unique cinematography, production design. I watched the Eyes of Tammy Faye trailer today and thought to myself, there's more color in this than I've seen all year. We've got to get our palettes up, and seeing something that has infused this futuristic tone with combinations of Brazil, some Bioshock, Fallout, and taken that and swirled it up with this like Merry Melodies cartoon and thrown us something with this ominous score in the background is making one of the like the weirdest, most colorful, unique tones. When we just look outside at the world in that one shot, I would have bought an IMAX ticket. I could have explored that all day. That was incredible. I can't think of anything else that we've seen like it. And you then have these actors that we've already praised. Tom Hiddleston is just so charming. Owen Wilson back in like Wedding Crashers prime. This is an actor I've missed. I missed that man's wonky nose and his silly style. And he just doesn't come around as much as anymore. And when he does it, it's just so good. And just hearing that charisma come back, it felt like going home to me.
He has such
somebody. Sorry, I saw somebody like online somewhere, something be like, Owen Wilson's nose is distracting. And I was like, how dare you? First of all, how young are you that you can't appreciate the cinematic treasure that is Owen Wilson's face? It just like seeing him back on my screen is just such a joy.
He has such an unorthodox way of delivering, but it's gets so rhythmic, you kind of just get caught up into it. I do deeply. You don't realize you miss Owen until he's gone for a while, and you get him, you're like, oh, that's what I've been missing. I need more of you in my life.
So many small lines when he has the mischievous scamp line and pleading to the judge. I was like, oh, I missed this cadence. Yeah. I just want to put on old Ben Stiller, Owen Wilson comedies and reminisce of a simpler time.
For me, it's got me craving the Wes Anderson filmography. That's like, I think that during Loki, I'm definitely going to be revisiting some of those.
Yeah, Wes and the early weird Coen stuff, like "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou" type of era. Like that's the vibe that I'm getting from it. I'm all in.
I totally did not think Coen until you said that, and that's totally on track. I really dig that comparison.
And then, I mean, we would be remiss not to talk about the yet again, the incredible blend of comedy and drama that Marvel just keeps hitting us over the head with. And watching Tom Hiddleston, maybe one of my few complaints is that we're watching a lot of old footage. We are doing the greatest hits of
like a clip show
in the MCU. I don't mind it. I'm a sucker for it. It satiates my need to rewatch all 20 of these movies in like 5 minutes, which is really what I want. But watching him see himself and study what he's done, what he's going to do, they gotta stop making me care about Thor: The Dark World, because the movie doesn't get better just because you highlight the best parts.
They are trying. They are really trying
Parents,
to make this a thing.
Could open up my high school report card and I can show you the 2 classes I got A's in. The rest of it is still C's and D's.
No matter how you dress it up, it's still there.
It doesn't matter if you keep showing me Renee Russo. It doesn't matter if you bring her back. It does matter when you bring her back in Endgame, because I was amazing.
So wonderful.
Oh my God. Now, I watched, I did a Loki marathon yesterday, and I watched every movie that Loki was in. And I, watching the Thor and Frigga moment in Endgame, I was like, oh, Loki deserves this, because that was like the closest person in his life. And now that like I keep saying this, but like I put on my clown shoes, they showed me a clip of Coulson, and now I'm expecting for a Coulson cameo.
I feel like they hang on it so long that he have to bring him up at some point.
But the same with Frigga. Like I feel like both. I feel like I want a scene with Loki and Coulson, and I want a scene with Loki and Frigga. I feel like Mom would be more impactful, but Jamie Jirak wants to see Coulson. But
yeah,
we've done this dance. I feel like it's that scene in The Matrix. You've gone down this road, Jamie. You know exactly where it ends.
They're going to keep burning me, but that's okay.
We think Doctor Strange is coming. We think Spider-Man's coming. Yeah. Mephisto's
we'll show you a
somewhere.
Red Devilish on a photo. Hey, Mephisto everywhere. The one thing that I will say that it was a little weird, and this happens in comics, period, and especially when you're doing it with time travel, I was a little upset with how flippant they were with the Infinity Stones and the Tesseract. They're kind of like, yeah, this no longer really means that much. And I'm like, yeah, it did a second ago though.
Well, I think
Don't do that.
it's the context of where we are, right?
Yeah.
And I think one of the important things to remember in the Marvel pantheon of comics and in their world is that the Infinity Stones work in their own reality. When they did Amalgam and Darkseid from DC Comics got the stones and brought them back into the DC world, they didn't work. When they've brought them across the Ultimate Universe and into other worlds, they don't work.
Mm-hmm.
They work in the reality they are made for. And they seem to be treating the TVA as if they are above any and all reality. We're now.
I think that was really cool.
I dig it, and especially when I take it like, okay, timeline A, they have their own troubles and whatnot. Timeline B has different things, and I'm like, all right, if I take it that way, I'm fine. But it's just something that comics do as a whole. Where like we have this big event, the big event happens. Now that big event is not the biggest event anymore.
Remember when Cap was Hydra and Scott Summers had the Phoenix Force?
Yeah.
But then there were just so many callbacks, which I think is also why I didn't mind it, because they were kind of doing like film school script analysis for us in real time. You had Owen Wilson playing therapist of, well, why are you hurting these people, Loki? Do you like it? Is this who you want to be? Why did you say all of these lines? Why do you keep saying you're burdened with glorious purpose?
There's no mischief being done here.
You're just murdering people.
So
like in Avengers, I'm like, well, he killed 80 people in 2 days. And yet, God, I love him. I keep joking, like, he can do no wrong. He can stab Coulson, the star of my favorite TV show, and I still love him.
It's the jawline. I'm pretty sure if I had a jawline like that, I'd be invincible. I could do anything that I set my mind to. Were it so easy. But, when we get all of these deeper moments, I think it's showing us not only how this character is going to change, but what he feels has been thrust upon him, which I think we've always interpreted as ruling. And it turns out it's part of his illusion. It's part of showing that I'm powerful. It's part of making it seem like I'm something else. I have to play this role. I have to be the villain, which just goes back to him being the son of Laufey. And I think that trauma has been pushing every other choice he's made.
Oh, for sure.
To be like, see, I'm the bad guy.
Well, I mean, you can think about it. Like the visage of Tom Hiddleston is already him putting on an affectation. Like he doesn't normally look like that. We've seen him be the blue form. So identity is going to be a big thing about all of this. And then, like, what is your true identity? Because you have chosen this form, but you don't have to. Nor do you have to do all the other things that you've been doing all this time.
I think it's something Marvel likes to do with their villains. If you even go back to how they've treated Magneto and Mystique in the X-Men movies, we sort of keep being like, but maybe. And I like some of my villains to just be bad.
Yeah, and that's why I always love the Joker, because it's like, oh, you are a straight line. Every now and then I want to have some of those straight line folks. But every now and then I do want the gray area folks who are like questioning, but why am I bad?
My all-time favorite trope, especially in TV, are characters like bad boys who spend a couple seasons being bad, but they really just want to be good boys, like Spike on Buffy, Jaime Lannister, Sawyer from Lost. Like, those are all my favorite characters because I just love watching these sad boys try to be good, but they keep failing at being good, and it really hits me in the spot. And Loki's just like that. That's why
I always love those, especially the ones you just mentioned with Lannister and Sawyer. Like, oh, the ones who, like, when they go bad, they get a beard, and then when they go back to being good, they kind of shave the beard. They get clean cut. It's fantastic.
I think it's also interesting that you say that it's somebody aspiring to be good and be this better version of themselves. And we just came off of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which was very much about living up to these symbols and this process of constantly being good enough. And I think the other side of that coin is, of course, the people who are trying really hard to be somebody and can't do it. Like, we saw Bucky and Sam both step up to the plate and succeed at being these giant symbols of redemption and of hope and of inspiration and standing up for what's right. And it'll be interesting now to see a character who it seems like at his core wants that, but either doesn't know how or doesn't have the tools or just isn't good enough to do it.
Yeah.
Because all the people who want to be good are a little bad.
Or it's a weird thing too that just happens sometimes. He existed in a world where that was expected of him, where everybody's like, hey, you're Loki, this is what you do. He is now being put in a world where that is not. He can kind of do whatever it is he chooses to do. So that might just be different. Like, oh, I don't have these expectations where I automatically walk into a room and I'm the most hated person in here.
Which is also interesting because his whole thesis, and it comes back in this episode, is the great lie of freedom. When he shows up in Avengers, it's, oh, you don't really want this. Freedom makes you have choices. Having choices means you make the wrong decision. Having the wrong decision means you have regret. And I loved him fully explaining that, because when he says it in Avengers, I was like, that's an interesting point, but we're not really getting into what does that mean? And when he says all that to Owen Wilson, it almost feels altruistic of him to be like, I want to leave this for you. I want you to be the best version of yourself. That just means I tell you what it is and you do it. Which is like, well, it's not
exactly
right.
Right.
But it's an interesting, because if he had that, if there was somebody just being like, don't be bad, he probably would be like, great.
Yeah.
So you're right. Now he has that freedom that he's condemned for his entire arc. It was a great episode. I'm thrilled to see where this character goes and how we push it. But now it is time to go back in time, as they say. I would have sang it, but I couldn't.
I just heard the song in my head. I did a little shimmy for those not watching.
Need money. Guys, it's time to talk about Back to the Future, the 1985 4th of July weekend. After 40 failed attempts to get the movie made because of a bad track record from Zemeckis, and because the movie apparently did not fit the raunchy comedy era of the 80s, kept turning it down. Until finally he did Romancing the Stone. And Universal said, well, we'll give you a deal. Because Romancing the Stone is, of course, great. And now we have Back to the Future. And we almost had Eric Stoltz, but like a man who went back and made another version of it, we now have Michael J. Fox and Christopher Lloyd in a movie, if you somehow don't know, where Michael J. Fox is positioned. He accidentally really goes back in time after his old man friend that he has shows him an experiment at 1 a.m, and lo and behold, terrorists have found him. When you say it out loud, of course the studio's passed.
Nuts.
I'd like to say that we happen to be doing this on Michael J. Fox's birthday, which I think is a fun
Happy birthday.
He's been right here on my desk all day.
Yeah.
No, Alex Keaton.
There's a tie-in for our podcast for you.
Yeah. It is. It's his birthday and Natalie Portman's. It's a lot of birthdays on June 9th in the celebrity world. But one of his best performance, one of Christopher Lloyd's best performance, they of course go back in time in a DeLorean where Marty really only has to get home, but decides to make his life a little bit better in the process. And by his life, I of course mean his parents' life. But really, unlike any other time travel movie where we go, don't do any of that, we do all of it.
He does everything.
Jamie, you've now chef kissed this movie 3 times while we've sat here. Tell us how you feel about this entire saga of time traveling nonsense.
Back to the Future, the trilogy was such a staple for me growing up. I didn't get to watch it this week, just time wise, and it was like, well, that's fine. I can still talk about it in length, as I think we all can.
Yeah.
The first movie is just a perfect movie. I mean, everything about the first movie is just so pristine and fun and weird. And even the sequels are significantly worse, but still so entertaining. And you know, the time travel isn't very complicated. They spell out the rules. It's all pretty clear. And it's just a really fun ride. It's a classic. I think Back to the Future is one of the greatest movies ever made.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those movies that they keep like, oh, we're going to make a sequel or remake. I'm like, please do not touch that. That is one of those ones you should not do. I remember the first time I saw this, and it was the whole just opening sequence with him getting out of bed. We don't really see him, and then you get him skating down the street. I'm like, I don't know what's happening, but I love all of this. This is just a fun little time that I'm going on. It became sort of ingrained in just the DNA. Whenever I see that or hear that needle drop of that song, I'm like, ah, yes, simpler times when man was just trying to get his mom and dad together, and his mom fell in love with him. Good times.
So weird.
It's so weird, but
There's
it's
a
just...
lot of stuff in that movie that when you get under the hood is weird.
But it's just...
We've hired Biff to work for us after his crimes.
After he is a criminal. Yeah, it's just... But like altogether, the series as a whole, it's one of those ones where you're like, yes, and she's correct. There's 2 and 3 are 2, 3. They go down in levels as they go along, but I do still enjoy them as a whole because Michael J. Fox is throughout all of them and is just having the time of his life. And I can watch, especially in that era, I can watch Mike do sort of anything. It's just he was infectious. It would have been a very different film had this been Eric Stoltz.
And I like Eric Stoltz, but yeah, I can't. I feel like he would have been like too creepy with his mom.
Have you seen the footage? It doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
Yeah.
And I think that whole like... There is, we've talked about on our other show, You Can't Do That Anymore, there is sort of there's an assault sequence that happens in this movie that had it been Eric Stoltz, it probably would have played differently just because it just doesn't feel like Michael J. Fox doesn't feel as the everyday neighbor type of person that Eric Stoltz would just be like, oh, dude, this might be a problem. Get that man out of that car now.
I always associate Eric Stoltz. There's a lot of movies, but when I was in middle school, I was so obsessed with The Butterfly Effect, and he was a pedophile in that movie. So like, my brain really goes there a lot with it. That movie's terrible. Also, though, kind of time traveling. Actually, that movie would work really well for this podcast.
Butterfly Effect will
not
take any
here.
besmirching from you.
I love that movie. I saw it 3 times in theaters. I owned it on DVD.
I love that film.
But okay, I think we should do that for this.
It was on my list that I sent.
I forgot that. I haven't watched that movie in a long time. I'd be really into that. But anyway, I often associate Eric Stoltz with that movie.
No, I think you're all right. I don't know what else there is to say about Back to the Future that hasn't been said already, except everyone's sitting here like 3 is terrible when it is, in fact, the second best one.
I put them really close together. I mean,
'cause
3
I love
has Mary
2 is
Surgeon.
just 1 again, but in the future.
I think I just love the future so much compared to the Western. That's why I guess the third one is a better made film. I just appreciate future stuff more than I do past stuff.
When I was a kid, that's why 2 was my favorite because like it was just cool to see. I think I have not watched 2. I don't think since the Trump era happened, and I have a feeling it would be harder to watch now.
It is, but it is the most toyetic of all 3 of them. If you were gonna make a bunch of things to buy, you would buy them from Do.
Yeah, shoes, skateboard, like
the hoverboard, the DeLorean flies. That's the one where they were like, get some Happy Meal deals.
We want to sell all the toys.
I mean, I think it makes sense. It's interesting. You're right. It's one where the rules are very easy. In 2, it's even easier. We've just got a chalkboard and we've made 2 timelines. We got to go back and make 1 timeline again. Very similar to Endgame and Marvel, I feel like, even though Ant-Man said it was a bunch of bullshit. The only difference is that they don't get to undo the other one. That schism still exists. But I always am like, Endgame's like, it's like Back to the Future adjacent rules.
Can I say this? But every time I've seen, like you, Blake, and I'm sure Terrence as well, I've seen Endgame an embarrassing number of times. And my one part that gets under my skin every time, and I'm like, I wish I could have written this scene, is when Tony says to Scott, he's like, "Are you basing this off of Back to the Future?" And Scott goes, "No." I want him to just take a beat and say, "It's Back to the Future 2," because that's really what he's describing is the plot of 2. And I think, and I'm like, and the first time I saw that movie, I assumed that's where that bit was going, but he just ends it on no. And I really think a joke would have landed much better if he said, "No, it's Back to the Future 2," because that's absolutely what's happening.
Just make it seem so asinine that he's saying Back to the Future. Like, no, it's clearly Back to the Future 2.
Exactly. Every time I watch that scene, I'm like, give me that extra line. It would make more sense.
My favorite part of all 3 of these movies is that as it goes on, Doc Brown slowly stops caring about his own rules. Well, in the first one, it's Marty, we can't know too much about our own time. We can't do anything. And in 2, then he just rolls up and is like, we gotta fix your kids.
We gotta go back.
They're hooligans. And then in the 3rd movie, he has a flying train with a woman he's abducted out of time.
Epic.
And is like, Marty, we're gods, Marty. I can do anything I want. It just slowly becomes Rick and Morty when you really think about it. That is a man who rips up a letter forbidding his doom, and then at the end is like, Jennifer, have I told you recently that we can do anything? Have you seen my train that anyone can see?
Everybody
Remember
can
when
see
Biff
it?
stole my almanac by seeing this?
Yeah.
Irrelevant. But they're great. Classic, timeless movies about voyeurism and attempted assault. You got to scrub those out, but
You do. The gentrification of jazz music,
he
or
does
gosh.
steal. He is Eminem was highly influenced by Marty McFly at the Under the Sea dance. Before Elvis did it, Marty McFly did it.
and a lot of those things, like, again, it's product of its time. A lot of those things I did notice until like a rewatch. I'm like, oh, these are awesome. This is still fun. I still enjoy
the only
this.
reason we notice these things is because we have seen the movie too many times and we've talked about everything else. And all
Correct.
that was left to do is be like, did he steal music from people? Is he Napster? Is Marty McFly Napster?
Yeah.
But we're not here to fantasize about what Napster could and couldn't have been. We are here, of course, to dive into why we've chosen this movie to go with our part one of Loki. And I think what it comes down to for this pilot and this franchise, to me, is watching these characters change based on what they know. Traditionally in movies, a character has to go through something to have an arc and go on a journey of self-discovery and make mistakes and have a false blah blah. You read the Save the Cat book, you know what I mean. They go on a journey, and in time travel movies, very often it is either a warning or a reconciliation or a choice to change the past. And I think when you look at Back to the Future, it's interesting because Marty McFly doesn't so much have an arc as much as his dad does by proxy.
Mm-hmm.
Marty goes back in time and teaches his dad to stand up for himself, allowing Marty to have a monster truck in the future because his dad has had the balls to sell a book.
Yeah.
Again, when I say it out loud, of course the studio's passed.
Make Biff wash my car.
But it's interesting because I feel like in the similar way, we now have Loki watching himself, watching the slideshow of things to come, and debating who he is in a way that he didn't really do until after Thor Ragnarok. I think Loki's final arc is in that quick moment in Infinity War when he decides not to have Thor die and goes to kill Thanos and ultimately fails. And it's interesting. So I want to ask you guys, what do you think about these type of arcs that almost exist just because they have cheat codes almost? They've looked back in time and gone, it could be better. I
could do something different. I think it's purposeful that Marvel chose to take the Loki pre his mom's death, because I think that's when he started to get a signal of humanity and started changing things up a little bit. You could see that he was weakening or becoming more caring. That Loki post Avengers 1 is still like, I want to destroy everything. So it was good to take that one out of his element and then show him, this is what you become, because you're kind of like, here's a mirror, and this is all the stuff that you've been doing. This is the pain you're going to go through. It's not going to get to what you think it is. It's going to end in you losing everything that you love, including your brother. Even though you didn't die, you're going to lose him too, and then you're going to die at the hands of somebody who has been seeking power and is infinitely more powerful than you. That is just a gut punch to get all of that at once, and you're kind of like, oh, maybe I should change that up. It's sort of similar in a way, but it's like you said, it's more towards the father, but it's sort of similar to what Marty gets in there. He's like, I've got to change. I have a chance to change the weak person that my father has become. Maybe if I do things differently or put him in these positions, or take the notes that I have to give him to make him a stronger person, it'll make it better for him and for me in the long run.
And even Marty throughout the franchise, he learns. I mean, the whole chicken thing, which is such a silly way to ruin your life and be so mad that you're getting called a chicken. But
I don't like that because they shoot it in 2 and 3 as if that's also happened in the first movie. Mm-hmm. It's like this weird retroactive thing where they're like, well, everybody calls Marty a chicken.
Blake and I hate that. Like a lot of films do that, where they're like, we'll add this scene in here but we never saw that.
Remember in Back to the Future 1 when they called Marty a chick? Oh, you don't? We shot it exactly the same way in 2 and 3.
Yeah.
But you're hitting on a very good chord, because I think Marty goes through the same thing in 2 and 3. He sees like the ghosts of Christmas future. He has to watch this version of his reality where he has, even Griff says it to him, the guy who took his life and completely flushed it down the toilet. His wife is unhappy. He's making back alley deals against his boss. His kids are hooligans. His other kid apparently will just plan jailbreaks at the drop of a hat.
That's what he does.
I believe it's the daughter that does that, as I just watched. And then going all the way back to 1, we have to meet his like ancestor, who's the one who has to be like, "No, Sonny, you could have let it go." And somehow everyone's driving monster trucks in 1985. But it's an interesting thing, I think, to watch a character go through trauma and then not have to deal with that trauma.
The Loki, like going back, all of that growth he did at the end of Ragnarok, the scene in Infinity War, I think it's really interesting because, I mean, obviously he's going to have to grow again, and he's probably going to surpass his growth that we'd already seen. Otherwise, what's the point of this kind of show? And I find that fascinating. A part of me kind of is sad that, like, oh, he this is such a step back. He's leveling down so much, but it's going to be such a different journey, and there's so many more doors. What I'm hoping we get at least one kind of Back to the Future 2 moment where Marty is like the car, where he's like involved in his own car chase.
Oh, you want them to have filmed like Avengers 2 from the other angle?
I really love that shit. I like that so much in Endgame too. I'm such a sucker for that, and that's what I'm hoping. Like, give me Coulson.
Like that whole. I'm with you. That whole sequence in Endgame when Tony's watching them do the pose and stuff. I was like, I'm a sucker. You play this to me and do this for a whole movie, I'm in. Like, I'll watch the reverse angle of an entire flick. So yes, I'm in that same boat with you. If we get a moment like that with Loki watching himself do something and calling it out, I'm like, oh yeah, this is it. This is what I'm here for.
I think you'll get that. I think you'll get more of B.D. Cooper and him in the airplane. Hopefully,
yeah, we have to get more of that, because it's a fun little bit, but it has to be more than just a bit. It seems like weird.
That's his Bond.
Just something
that's
he
his
does.
Bond like promo tape. Like, this is what I want to be Bond. Here, take this.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of what that was, but I'm wondering if we'll see him as other historical figures.
I think we will. I think we'll probably get him, which will be fun. I think you'll get him because he's been able to shapeshift all this time. You get him historical figures, you get him just random stuff. I'm like, oh, cool. And considering that Disney has money to sort of buy almost any and everything, most of the stuff under their umbrella, like, they can kind of get away with a lot in their history of like this film or this movie. You could do whatever. It's going to be fun, I think, to sort of go on that ride with whatever he shapeshifts to.
I think it'll be good. We're getting a lot of rules. I would, of course, die for Miss Minutes now. I need an episode of her every week explaining time to me through old Bugs Bunny cartoons.
Yeah.
And saying more ominous things about suffering for your
crimes. Because it gets dark. I was like,
show off my
oh, look at you.
I love
it's fun.
Your Disneyland pen of Miss Minutes.
Yeah, that the impending multiverse war that she just like kindly just put out there. It's like, oh shit, it's going down.
It was amazing how many Easter eggs they put in this.
Yeah.
It's wild. I know that this will never happen, but I'm just like, in my dream scenario, a multiverse war means that they bring in the whole X-Men cast and fight. Like, I know that we're done with that X-Men cast, but I can still dream.
You know, I just watched Days of Futures Past last night, and I agree with you. I very much after that movie, I was like, clearly the solution to this was just do Days of Futures Past, have your Deadpool and your Logan, then Disney buys them and can just keep this timeline, and the answer can just be Days of Futures Past, put them in the MCU.
The only thing that wouldn't work is that the time travel rules are opposite. In Days of Future Past, they just change the future.
I have to, because they kind of
they made a branch reality that's in the MCU.
Well, that's what's weird, because I think they they kind of hint at his name, like, but Kang is a big part of like time travel, like all of this stuff. So, and we know Jonathan Majors is the actor, which if Jonathan Majors we know he's going to be an Ant-Man, but I feel like considering everything that's happening here, you would have to sort of bleed him in here somewhere.
I think he has to show up because what's her name?
Gugu and Batu.
Yeah. Her character and Kang are romantically
Right.
linked.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I feel like it makes sense.
Yeah.
Also, I'd love to see them touch mouths. So I would love to see that happen.
Gugu is gorgeous. Yeah, they're both good looking people.
They're both very attractive people.
Yeah.
So
let's see it.
Yeah, from what I know of Kang and what I've been like, it would be surprising if he's
not around. Yeah. But I obviously, what the big piece of this whole show is the whole like, yes, we want to recruit you because there's a Loki doing this, and I'm like, oh, is it going to be a 1-to-1 of his Loki? Is it going to be a different multiverse Loki, like a kid Loki or Lady Loki?
Oh, I'm sure that Kid Loki and
Lady Loki,
Loki are well, I think Lady Loki's the killer.
Got it.
That's my big theory, is that because we've confirmed he's gender fluid in the MCU as he is in the comics. So I'm sure
that so much.
Yeah,
I'm sure that we will get all sorts. Because it's also
I won't tell you who, but I will say your question will be answered.
Great.
I love it.
Great.
I love it.
Because they made it sound like the TVA has one timeline, that there's only one. There is no multiverse.
I don't believe it.
I think that there's a multiverse, and what they mean by that is just your timeline is one timeline.
Yes, I think that like this branch of the TVA focuses on this sacred timeline, but every timeline has their
That's
own
my other thing. Is I'm like, there's an Owen Wilson in another multiverse, and everyone. I think everybody. The great lie that we're gonna find out is that there was a war, and everyone is under the belief that there's one timeline, and they all think they're the one timeline.
But they've made
big reveal is going to be
multiple parallel timelines. 100%.
That's my big theory, and then we'll get Secret Invasion and Secret Wars. I was looking to see if I could find out, and I can't. The original Phase 4 plan pre-COVID, this would have been after the Multiverse of Madness and before What If. So I'm always kind of trying to be like, what was the story going to be?
What If like technically in the canon? I thought that was like
I think it's just its own
thing.
Sweet spot of things.
Multiverse, have a good time.
Yeah, just enjoy it. Knock yourself out.
What If is gonna because my favorite, we've talked about this kind of my favorite TV episodes are the ones where they when Buffy has alternate realities and stuff like that, and how the hell does T'Challa become Star-Lord? I can't
on the Guardian ship. Yeah,
to watch
I can't
that
wait to see that. Yeah.
That's, and just to know that we get a little more Chadwick.
I'll say one last time to hear him.
Special.
Yeah, I'm going to be with a bottle of wine crying that entire episode, but I'm gonna get through it. Yeah, it's weird because Blake's right. I mean, we were supposed to have Wanda, Strange, and this literally all back to back. Like it was supposed to be like one smorgasbord of time.
No Way Home wasn't even on the table.
Correct. Yeah. Which now that is actively playing a part of multiverse stuff.
Of whatever WandaVision multiverse, because originally then they said it's WandaVision, Spider-Man, Doctor Strange is our multiverse trilogy,
right?
With Loki. So, but you know what? This is why I'm not a big theory guessing person, because a part of me is just like, it's gonna come out.
Yeah, it's one of those ones. I was
literally just thinking the exact same thing. I hate this part. I don't like speculating and guessing about stuff like that. I just want to
enjoy it. Yeah, I just want to enjoy it. Like I sit here, like I said this on the video that's on here for YouTube for Loki when I talk about the show. I was like, you guys are gonna do this Mephisto. I don't care. Like if he comes, cool, he comes. I just want to enjoy the moment that I'm in, because this shit is a hell of a ride.
I will say, I don't think Mephisto's coming. I don't think we'll see Mephisto for quite a long time.
Yeah.
But it doesn't help to be like, who's the killer, and have somebody point
to the big red devil,
the literal devil.
The big red devil.
I think as somebody who I don't, the whole Mephisto thing, I don't care about it. And I saw that and I was like, oh, because Loki has horns. Mephisto didn't even cross my mind until the internet started talking about it. And I just like that. My Phase Zero, my works podcast. That's that's our job to do speculation. Like it's literally like
Right.
that's part of our thing. And I admit I prefer coming here and just being like, here's how it kind of relates to Back to the Future, because I'm not an expert. I have not read all, like, WandaVision, I read a lot of comics to prep for that. I did not do that for Loki, so I don't have like these big guesses. I just want to watch Tom Hiddleston be hot and grow as a person.
Yeah. Can we all just get that? That's
Yeah.
enough.
No, the internet demands that I make a thumbnail with all three of our faces being very excited. And then, but I won't be doing that. And I won't be doing any speculations either. And you don't need to worry about that here. Here, we are just giving you more fun analyses, more pairing ups of time travel movies. So you don't need much to enjoy our show. You don't need money. You don't need a fame. You don't need a credit card to ride this train. You do, however, need to leave us a review on iTunes and subscribe on whichever podcast channel you're listening to, as well as our YouTube channel that Terrence runs, which does have trailer reactions and episode by episode reviews without our nonsense. Of course, there's also the regular Hollywood Already Did It podcast, which is more frequent now as movies are releasing again, where we look at reboots, remakes, sequels, adaptations, and wonder why we keep doing this. There's also You Can't Do That Anymore, where we bring on guests to tell us movies that they don't think you could do anymore. You can listen to an excellent episode about Back to the Future on that, where we get into some of the things that haven't aged as well in that movie. As Jamie mentioned, she's also on the Phase Zero podcast at comicbook.com, and you can listen to that every
Wednesday. We go live on Twitch Wednesdays at noon Eastern.
Great. Then does it go live on podcast like the next day? It's a podcast.
Yeah, it gets put places.
Great.
Follow them on Twitter to know more about that. That is, I just show up when they tell me to and talk about stuff. My only job on that podcast is to make it like to drop as many queer bombs as I can. To be like, what if these boys kiss though? Like that's really my whole angle on that show. I have nothing to do with the promotion.
I love it.
Great. You can, of course, follow me at, as always, Blake, Terrence at Terrence Tatum, and Jamie at Jamie Cinematics, and the show at Hollywood ADI. And we will see you next week for Loki.